Okay, so today we'll resume chapter 5 regarding what we are studying in this chapter? MOSFETs, very good. So we started last time, the MOSFET, we talked about the physical structure, then we talked about the IV characteristic, and we arrived to a good expression of ID, VD. This is the characteristic of the transistor. It's not the transfer. ID, VDS is not the transfer. It's the ID, VDS characteristic. It's basically the IV characteristic. IV characteristic of the diode is what? ID, the diode is equal to IS, E, V over VT. Yes or no? The IV characteristic, IV, yeah, remember I said IV. I said IV. So there is IV characteristic, etc. And there is the transfer characteristic. The transfer characteristic. When we talk about transfer characteristic, we are talking about V out as a function of V in. Yes or no? But IV characteristic, we are talking about the current in a function of the voltage. For the resistor, the IV characteristic is the IV characteristic of the resistor. I equal V over R. It's a line of slope 1 over R. Yeah? It's Ohm's law. Yes or no? And V here means actually the difference of voltage. Okay? Alright, good. So the IV characteristic of the diode, we did it. Now we have also IV characteristic of the MOSFET. But here in the beginning we said that for small values of VDS, that's what we did last time, for small values of VDS, the IV characteristic of the MOSFET is linear for small values of VDS. We'll talk about how small these values are as much as we can. And we found the slope of this characteristic. The slope for a resistor is 1 over R. Here is the same thing, 1 over R. But R here, it does change with the overdrive. And what's the overdrive, by the way? What is the overdrive voltage? Raise your hand, huh? What is the overdrive? Or what is the overdrive voltage? We studied this also last time, yes?
VGS minus VT.
Very good. It's VGS minus VT. It's the voltage above which we have the channel, basically. So the channel, we have it when VGS bigger than VT. And VT is what? Threshold voltage. Is the threshold voltage. Listen, Mina, threshold voltage. Why did you call it threshold voltage? Because it's the voltage above which the channel will start to exist. So if VGS is above VT, the channel will be created. And what does it mean, channel? It's basically a path that we create to let the water or the current pass from the drain to the source. Without that channel, there is no path. There is no current. So a condition to have this current is the first and foremost, VGS has to be above VT by a certain value that we call V overdrive. Okay? So if VGS is equal to VT or less than VT, there is no current. That's why this curve. 0. Now, if VGS is above VT by V overdrive, then we will have a current, and that current has this ID characteristic, IV characteristic, that is the same like Ohm's law, 1 over R VDS, where R, we found it very easily. It's not there. Oh, it's there actually. Where RDS, I just rewrite this, is equal to 1 over Kn, actually Kn prime, huh? It's hidden there, Kn prime. There's another mistake also. Kn, this is Kn prime, V over W over L, V overdrive. Okay? This is what we did last time. But here we did not maybe, yeah, it's mentioned here. So Kn, it's a new parameter. It's not Kn prime. Now this, what you see here, Kn prime, if you remember, is actually mu n, mobility, times what? Cox. Remember that? Okay, that Kn prime, we call it the process transconductance parameter. It's due to the manufacturing. Now, if we multiply this by W over L, which we call it the aspect ratio, remember that? If we multiply this together, we get a new parameter. We call it Kn without the prime, and we call it just the transconductance parameter. That's it. Because it's not related to the process, it's related to the process by this parameter and to the design as you are going to design or set the values of W over L, because it's related to 2, so it will not be a process related only, it will be related to the process and to the design parameter, which is the aspect ratio W over L. So when we multiply them together, we find a new parameter, we call it Kn. Okay? So if you write it, you can write basically Kn prime, W multiplied by W over L is going to be equal to Kn. Remember this, because we are going to see these two parameters, Kn and Kn primes, many times. Anyways, so the slope of this IV characteristic, it changed with what? With overdrive. You can see, this resistor, which is the slope of this, is 1 over Kn. If you write it again like this, is 1 over Kn overdrive. So that means if we increase the overdrive, we decrease the RDS, yes or no, the resistance. And if we decrease the overdrive, RDS will be increased. Very good. So it's like what, for example? It's like basically if you are in a garden. Have you been in the garden? Good. So we have here a pond, and here we have a pond. And there's water here, or maybe here I have a river, or something like water reservoir. And here I have a pond. And I want to transport the water between the two. If I dig deep the channel, the water, most of the water there, quickly will move to the pond. So it's basically, I am letting the channel to be wider and bigger, and therefore it will be less resistance. So the current will pass very quickly. The resistance is basically very small. The same thing here. So the overdrive, when it's increased, it means we've increased the channel, we let the current pass easily. Okay? So the resistance will be less, because the conductivity is higher in this case. Yes or no? We increase the conductivity of the current. Now, if we make the channel not wide, we make it very small. So a little water will pass, yes or no? And you have to wait for hours and hours to let the water pass. That means the resistance is so high of the channel. And why? Because the channel is not deep enough. Okay? So the overdrive voltage, the purpose of the overdrive is to make the channel wide or shallow. Shallow يعني? shallow يعني what's the in Arabic? مش سطحي يعني غير عميق. ولو كنا نتأكد أن in Arabic there's another word. لا مش ضيق. نسيت والله نسيت. anyways لما نتذكر نقول. المهم shallow معناته غير عميق. يعني shallow. If I want to increase the channel, I increase the overdrive by increasing the gate voltage. صح ولا لا? And if I want to make the channel shallow, I just reduce the overdrive, decrease the gate voltage, and then in this case it will be shallow and the resistance will be high because the current cannot pass too much. Okay? That's a summary of what we did last time, just quick review. So let's keep going. Alright, bye-bye. So what happens now when VDS increases beyond these small values? What will happen? Things will happen. So the linear relationship between ID, VDS will stop. Why? We'll explain that in a second. But first and foremost, we have to keep VGS constant. Means we have to create first the channel. that means VGS, is above VT. By how much? By the overdrive. Yani VT plus overdrive, VGS. Okay? First and foremost. And then we start to crank or increase the drain voltage. When we do that, what will happen? We'll see what will happen next. We'll come to this equation in a second. So this is what will happen. Initially when VDS was small, we had the channel uniform. We have the channel, all this was the channel. Uniform, and not only that, uniform, and all the charges here, they felt the same voltage from the gate. Because who created this is the gate. Now, as the gate, so the gate will create them, and we said that the amount of charge in the channel is going to be equal. The voltage that create them basically is the overdrive voltage, okay? Okay, V overdrive, multiplied by the capacitance, which is Cox, so no, WL, which is the capacitance of the whole thing, if you remember. All right, that's how we basically started the argument of, so basically Q that is stored inside the channel initially. But as I said, initially we assumed that V overdrive is the voltage of every single point along the channel. Now, this is before, okay, when VDS is small, okay? Now, when VDS increases, what will happen? Basically, the charge in here will see exactly the overdrive, V overdrive. But VDS here now has increased too much. As we go from here from the source towards the drain, the charge here, we will feel how much? We will feel less and less voltage. Why? Because some of that voltage will be taken by the drain. In other words, the voltage here, VGS, so the voltage here between the gate and the source, right at the beginning of the channel, we have VGS, okay, which is what? The VT plus the overdrive, yes or no? Okay, so this is the voltage where? The voltage that these guys, they will feel. Now, as when the charge reach, or the electron reach the drain in here, the voltage that they will feel is actually VGD, okay? Now, VGD, how much is it equal? Which is the gate minus this voltage, okay? That voltage, now I'll write it in blue or in black, whatever. So VGD, this is VGS, okay? So this is how the charge they will feel. This charge in here, they feel VGS, but these guys, they feel VGD, and these two are not equal, okay? Why? Because of this. Because of this simple equation that we can write it. So VGD is going to be equal to VGS, VG minus VS, minus VDS. Why we did that? It's very simple. We start by this. We say VGD is VG minus VD. Yes or no? VG minus VD. Yes or no? Let me calibrate the board again, because there's some problem there. Okay, and then what we do, we throw VS here, so minus VS, and plus VS in here. So plus VS, minus VS, boom, okay. And we can take here the minus as common factor, so we can say this is minus here, and then this becomes minus, minus, and then we do this. But this is nothing but VGS, okay, VGS. And this is nothing but VDS. VDS. So in other words, I can write VGD as, after I finish the business, so I replace now VGS by what? By VT plus V overdrive. Yes or no? Because that's VGS. Yes or no? And VDS, we keep VDS. So as I said, now the VGD from the gate to the drain or the end of the channel, that voltage will be not VT plus V overdrive, which is VGS. It will be VT plus V overdrive minus VDS. Okay? Do you understand? So in other words, so here basically this is what it means, VGS, which is this, minus VDS. Okay? So now, what does it mean? So VGD will be VGS minus VDS. So initially when VDS was small, VGD was equal to VGS. Yes or no? That means the charge here will feel the same voltage as the charge in here. So that's why we have uniform channel. And we extract the equation very smoothly, very nicely last time. But in this case that we are in, is not anymore. They are not equal, these two voltages. Here this voltage is going to be VGS, and this voltage is going to be VGD, and they are not different. They are not the same because VGD is equal to VGS minus VDS. Okay? Is equal to this minus VDS, which is the voltage of the drain with respect to the source. Okay? So the charge will feel here voltage that is higher than the voltage in here. Very good. Very good, very good, very good, very good. That means the depth, we said that the voltage they feel, if they feel higher voltage, the channel will be wider. If they feel smaller voltage, the channel will be shallower. That's why it's shallow here and it's wider here. Okay? Let's keep going. Okay? If you have any question, please stop me, okay? Alright? We are just going smoothly and easily, okay? Bye-bye. And that's what we meant. So now this is the channel now. The channel is wider near the source, you see? And is shallower near the drain. Why? Because the voltage in here is VGD, and it's going to be equal to VGS minus VDS. Or I can write it is equal to V overdrive plus VT minus VDS, because this is nothing but that. Very, very good. Now, the charge that is stored in the channel, we can prove easily, and you have some proofs also in the textbook, but we don't need really to spend too much time there. It's going to be equal to this expression, Cox WL, which is the capacitance of the gate, times, it should be here a voltage, yes or no? Initially, when VDS was small, it was like this, yes or no? It was uniform channel, and it was like this. But now, the voltage of the channel is not constant anymore. It actually varies from the overdrive to the overdrive minus VDS, okay? VGS minus the VDS. And for that matter, to see how much the voltage of the channel, we here choose the average value of VDS, means at the midway here. In any case, for further proof, you can look at the textbook. But for now, you have to trust that the amount of the charge here of the channel is going to be, this Q is going to be equal to this expression. Very good. This is very interesting. Why? Because the overdrive is kept constant, but VDS, it does change. Okay, it does change. That means Q will change dependent on VDS. The amount of charge in the channel will change dependent on VDS, which is quite interesting. Okay? We keep going. Almost there. Now, in the previous equation we had, instead of, so we had this parameter multiplied by V overdrive. And then multiplied by VDS, if you remember this, when VDS was small. Now, because VDS now is not small anymore, we have to replace the overdrive voltage by the average voltage of the channel, which is going to be V overdrive minus half of VDS, okay? Or from the expression of the charge, and you get the same expression. Now, excellent. Now, so this is the expression of what? Of the current ID from the drain to the source. Now, this is the expression when VDS is not any longer a small value, when it is bigger. Some people, which is also a very common expression, they write it. This is what? What is this? This is Kn prime, yes or no? And what is this? It's Kn. So we'll keep it like that. We'll write it Kn, yes or no? Times what? Times V overdrive VDS minus half of VDS squared. Some people, they just make the multiplication and move on. Okay? Good. This is also common, okay? But this, the condition for this is that VDS should not be above V overdrive. Why? Because when VDS reached V overdrive, something happened to the channel at the drain. We'll explain that in a second. Okay? So for values of VDS less than overdrive, of course positive, this expression is valid and we'll use it. Now, if VDS, what we mean by otherwise, okay, hold on a second. Okay, oops. Just a second. All right. When VDS here, VDS is above V overdrive, then we have to replace VDS by the overdrive. We'll explain that in a second. And here, when we replace this VDS by overdrive here and there, we get this equation. Okay. We call the area or the operation when VDS is above the overdrive, we call that operation the saturation region. Why we call it saturation region? Because the current here, ID, for that region, when VDS is above the overdrive, is independent of VDS. It depends only on the overdrive. Means there is no relationship between ID and VD. They are now disconnected. The current does not depend on VD. We'll talk about the consequences of this. But when VDS is less than the overdrive, this is the equation. So basically the current has a quadratic relation with VDS. What does it mean, quadratic relation? Means when we plot it, it will not be linear. It's basically of the equation AX squared plus BX. If you basically replace X by basically VDS. Okay, is that correct? So that's the curve of the ID VDS when VDS is less than the overdrive, which we call it the VDS saturation or the saturation voltage. The drain to source saturation voltage. So this makes the boundary between two operations. This operation where the current is quadratic with respect to the voltage, okay, and we call it the triode region. And this region where basically the voltage, the drain voltage, is above the overdrive, we'll call it the saturation. And as you can see, the current is completely independent of the VDS. So VDS increases as much as it wants. The current here stays all constant here, as you can see in blue. Okay? So this is basically the things that we need to cover by this week. Inshallah, next week we'll go further and explain what we mean by the saturation region, why the current is not dependent on the voltage of the drain anymore, and we'll explain the pinch-off effect, okay? And that's it for today. See you next week.